Hello and welcome to WhateverEtc for March the 25th, 2013. Keith Brown, Reason Existenz blog, coming back to you to move forward a little more with my thoughts on the loving struggle. The last time we'd met, I had posted how we need, first of all, I'd been speaking on for a while about how we need to overcome the notion that all struggle is war, to get out of this sort of default to violence. But then towards the end of my last podcast, I had pointed out that the loving struggle itself cannot be a quiet struggle. And this is because we're engaged in letting go of the thinking and the habits of thinking that have predisposed us to a kind of violence in order to achieve a certain level of security. We cannot act in or from violence in the loving struggle, but we have to be ready for these pre-established habits to not go quietly, because they are the way that we have achieved a certain kind of security. Especially in a country like the United States of America, it can be pointed out that everybody, even the people who we would say are financially insecure, has achieved a certain kind of security by participating in either being violent or submitting to violence. Okay, and so these are the ways of being in the world that have given many of us a high level of security, right? But we seek to be careful, to care, not to merely be secure without care. This is entering into a solidarity, a good faith, that if we open ourselves up to others who would also become self-actualized, who would also reach a level of open communication, that we are embracing and being embraced by the very uncertainty of being. Now, what this means is, I really kind of want to highlight something out of really sort of out of the meaning of the very name of my blog. As I've mentioned on my blog, and I've mentioned I think I've mentioned in one or two podcasts, Reason Existenz is a series of lectures that Karl Jaspers gave in the late 1930s in, I believe, the Netherlands, when the Nazis were actually trying to get Jaspers to leave Nazi Germany and not come back. In this series of lectures, he really kind of brings home how we are always moving between reasonableness and existentiality. And this is not to say that existentiality has no reasonableness to it. There's no reason to it. And as I said last time, there has to be an overcoming of the rational force of argument. But this doesn't mean that we give up all reason. This means we give up rational force for the moment. Okay, there will still be a reasonableness to this. If it didn't have any aspect of reasonableness to it, then whatever we talk about in this attempt at self-actualization, this attempt at communication, it would be impossible, right? I'm speaking to you now with a kind of reason, but I'm not wanting to. But it's not the reason that we've become so accustomed to, that works from the default of violent struggle. I'm not asking you to subject yourself to me. I'm not asking you to see me as winning an argument. I'm trying to engage you and bring you forward. I'm attempting to engage myself and bring myself forward into a field where, even though our own being so singularly ourselves, we might not be able to fully communicate everything that's going on with us. There is this connectivity through reasonable expression that allows us to come very close to each other in our opening up and communicating our attempts at self-actualization. But an insight that I had recently, because I have been reading Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, as well as Michel Foucault's Society Must Be Defended, a recent insight that came to me was that Reason Existenz actually is a wonderful cipher as a valence, as a bivalence. It's a wonderful cipher by which we can talk about the loving struggle. Because in one sense, when we say the term reason and existenz, we actually are saying critique and crisis. Both words evolving through time from the same Greek roots, which basically mean to evaluate or to judge, to make a judgment. So a crisis is a time of judgment. Critique is an act of judgment. So reason and existenz then is how we can speak in the larger ciphers of thinking and being as we are, of critique and crisis. Every human life goes through crises. And it is only by decisive effort on our part that we move beyond the level of that crisis. Many times the crisis occurs because some violence is being acted upon us, because some oppression is being forced upon us by others. But this is also, there also can be moments where our own decisions, our own choices lead us to realize how we've oppressed ourselves because of the kinds of patterns that we've accepted as offering us a certain type of security. This is the wisdom then of insecurity, as Alan Watts would call it. The wisdom of insecurity is coming to that point where we negate the negation of care. Security is the negation of care. Insecurity is negating the negation of care. That is, coming back to carefulness through the very crisis that this having to move through a crisis. And it's in this crisis that usually comes out of some sort of recognition of a stasis in our life that's been brought about by oppression. That we have a moment of ecstasis, right? We have a moment of ecstasy. We have a moment of getting out, allowing us to make a judgment. This is the loving struggle, really, right? This moment of ecstasis is the loving struggle. So the putting the emphasis on existenz here and backgrounding reason for the moment, not abandoning it completely, but simply backgrounding it for the moment, puts us into a place, allows a transcendence by which we now can make a new judgment. We now can evaluate where we stand out against the world, in the world, with others in the world, where we stand out, and what we really want to do from that new position, okay, from that new synthesis that might come from this new judgment. I can't emphasize enough that because it's crisis, because it's uncertainty, we are not entering into quietude. We are not entering into tranquility per se, right? But let me also say this, that violent struggle, which is the position that we're the most familiar with, which is negated by loving struggle, okay, which is counterbalanced by loving struggle, where we detach and let go of this kind of default thinking that only through violence can we achieve the security that we need. That this violent struggle, negated by loving struggle, leads to real love, leads to authentic communication and openness with those others who would also negate violent struggle through loving struggle. So this crisis then is the point of departure, is the point of where we gain a kind of traction that we have not heretofore had. And that traction gives us a place where we can reach out to others who are also trying to gain traction, who also recognize the crisis or recognize being in crisis. And we gain allies, we gain people with whom we can have some level of solidarity. Jaspers points out in Philosophy Volume 2, let me just read to you for just a moment. I don't usually like to do this. He says, I cannot accomplish this communicative struggle by the rational force of argument. This is actually Volume 2 of Philosophy, page 214. I cannot accomplish this communicative struggle by the rational force of argument, but neither can I accomplish it without the most lucid rationality. I cannot realize it simply in utter devotion, in the most self-sacrificing love, but not without such love either. I cannot achieve it by aiming at definitive solutions, but neither can I achieve it without definite current tasks. As a temporal phenomenon, it is always unfinished. Here indeed lies a chance for the greatest assurance in the sense of absolute consciousness, but no chance at all for the certainty of having. It is this profound love of existence for existence which in temporal existence unveils the boundary situation as an eye-to-eye question in common peril, when the enduring jeopardy transforms everything, all occupied positions into steps and premises, all crystallizations into relativities, every possession into evanescence. And let me kind of go through that just for a little bit here, and I'll end this podcast, but I'm going to immediately begin making other podcasts. I'm not going to keep letting this habit I've gotten into of falling away from the podcasts keep occurring. So, but let me just kind of deconstruct this a little bit and play with it. So, as I've already been saying, Jaspers has noted that the communicative struggle by rational force cannot be done by rational force of argument, but neither can it be accomplished without the most lucid rationality. There's a different kind of rationality at work in this moment of crisis, and that actually is existential self-critique. Okay, so, and now the question of the loving struggle becomes, it's not about a kind of devotion to the other. The devotion to the other actually is one of the ways that we can enter into a kind of empathy that creates, or sympathy that creates subjugation, that creates me kind of rolling over and baring my neck, in utter devotion to a leader, or an utter devotion to somebody who I admire or care a great deal about or would be bound to. So it's not self-sacrificing love. Obviously, existenz, which I've already said so many times, is self-actualization. That's not self-sacrifice. This is the reason why it's not a kind of empathetic devotion, because in empathy, I give myself up in order to suffer what the other person is suffering. This is one of those places where I would point out that in a moment of crisis, like a plane begins to drop really quickly and it loses air pressure, and the oxygen mask falls down, and you have been warned a number of times before you help anyone else, put on your mask. Put on your own mask. Okay? That's the kind of crisis we're talking about. It is not a self-negating moment. Okay? This love is not a self-sacrificing love. But that doesn't mean that aspects of this are not there, because we are going to be getting rid of the aspects of ourselves that are not really us, They are part of our habitudes, part of our predispositions and presuppositions that have led us into our obsession with security. So we're sacrificing aspects of what we have thought heretofore are ourselves, but we're not actually sacrificing our very self. Okay? And he continues on, I cannot achieve the communicative struggle by aiming at definitive solutions. So we're not then aiming at what will always solve every problem, which is another obsession that we've gotten into. Part of our compulsion for security has been the attempt to find definitive solutions that will forever and always solve certain kinds of issues of being mortal entities. Okay? So what we're doing will not be a definitive solution. But, sorry, one of my alarms is going off over here. It will not be a definitive solution. But that doesn't mean that there won't be, as he says, definite current tasks. Because crisis is a moment of judgment, it has definite current tasks. Things that need to be taken care of, sometimes in the moment, sometimes through a decision where we may have to very quickly backtrack, accept responsibility for a choice we've made, and then go forward correcting our errors. But there are definite tasks here. Okay? Also, the fact that it's temporal means that this existence is a becoming, and therefore it's not ever going to be something that's finished. Okay? Self-actualization is not a definite solution where, aha, I have achieved self-actualization and now I shall always be self-actualized. You're kind of coming and going in and out of it, right? There's a moment of lucid reasoning where you make decisions, where you engage in what's going on, where you let go of unnecessary structures. But that doesn't mean that you have, when the crisis is over, right? When the ecstasis has abated, when the transcendence of where these current tasks were being worked, is brought back to sort of the everyday, right? That doesn't mean, okay, it's all done now, and there will never be a need, because now that I've self-actualized, there will never be another need for this. There will be more crises. There will be other crises. Some of them may be crises of human proportion. Some may be of all humanity. Some may be crises of social proportion. Some may be crises of the society at large that you live in. Some may be crises of familial or friendly proportion. Some may simply be self-crises. But there will always be more crises. This movement back and forth between critique and crisis is never finished. But here lies a chance, as he says, for the greatest assurance in the sense of absolute consciousness. And what that means is the sense of absolute consciousness then would be that sense that the things that we take for being complete solutions, last solutions, we never need to try to solve it again. Absolute consciousness actually would be making sense of the world, where we're always detaching from a sense of being done. Okay, absolute consciousness is always already on the way. Okay, that being the case, since it's always already on the way, since it's always already a process underway, there would be no chance at all for the certainty of having, right? Of always possessing it. And then Jaspers goes on. It is this profound love of existence for existence, of the self-actualized for the self-actualized, which in temporal existence unveils the boundary situation as an eye to eye question in common peril. And there really is the heart of the crisis. In solidarity, we share our open communication. Okay? It is solidarity. It is faith in each other to open up and share. Share what? Share in the enduring jeopardy that transforms everything. In this crisis, after a long period of time in which you may have engaged in critique, right? In which you may have engaged in trying to find the necessities of life, trying to meet the necessities of life, trying to achieve this kind of security. When that insecurity happens, when that ecstasis, that ecstasy, that transcendence into a moment of self-judgment, where you open up to the common peril and you reach out in the attempt of open communication, standing on the same ground as these others with whom you take up solidarity, everything is transformed. If I can paraphrase St. Paul, in the blink of an eye, everything changes. All the places that you had taken as firm, solutional, never-changing, always positions now become steps and premises. Right? Statements of certainty now become steps and premises, propositions. All that had been heretofore crystallized, hard, is now relativity, soft. Everything you thought was a pure, complete possession becomes an evanescence. And now you begin to see, in sort of taking apart this paragraph from Philosophy 2, in taking apart this paragraph, you see why existence, that self-actualization I've been blathering on about for a few episodes, existence is always possible existence. Where reason is about where reason and critique are about finding the necessary things that lie between, that connect together, existence is about the contingency. Existence is about possibility. And between these two ciphers really, of reason and existence, of critique and crisis, of necessity and possibility, between reason and existence comes life. Between critique and crisis comes knowledge. Between necessity and possibility comes actuality. And living through this loving struggle, achieving to that moment of love, where violent struggle is negated by loving struggle, and the negation of the negation, the loving struggle becomes love itself. Yeah? Now we have the actual knowledge of life. Okay. So expect another one tomorrow, and this time I actually mean expect another one tomorrow. I want to get in here and dig around and do a little bit of Paulo Freire and critical pedagogy with you guys. Namaste. Much love. And I'll see you on the morrow in solidarity. Thank you very much. Take care of yourselves.